Hello, I'm DIY Dick and thank you very much for joining me on the channel this evening, where the plan is to actually kick off the garden path part 2, but just to basically get those finishing touches done, because I think sometimes when you get the bulk of a project done you tend to move on to the next thing, especially if it's something urgent or perhaps even interesting, that you then just get on with that, and some of those just finishing touches, that last 10-20%, you don't quite get done, and I'm no different to anyone else and I certainly do that. So I'm hoping that as part of me documenting what I'm doing on these videos, it's going to encourage me to actually get them to 100%, or near as damn it. So I'm going to try and just kick it off this evening, as I've got a spare half an hour, just by doing some of the cutting I have to do to complete the edging on the path by the patio. Now, I was going to basically minimise what I had to do here, but I'm going to have to cut a brick. Hopefully you can see that, I've already marked that, so there's not really too much to do there. I've not really cut any others at all when doing the path, and really sort of avoided it as I've gone around the corners. When we go on to another part of this part 2, completing the path, we'll see how in filling all of those gaps with some cement is going to look, but hopefully that'll be okay. One of the other things we've got to cut is a step, so that's down here, a bit of black limestone, so that can be a bit of a pig to cut. I've cut some of these things before, so I've just got to cut halfway along the slab there, so actually that's not too bad across its shortish edge, so hopefully that won't be too painful. But one thing it is going to be really flipping messy. So let me get the GoPro out and let's start making that mess right now. So safety first, goggles on, ear defenders on, as this does get a tad bit loud. Probably should have worn a mask, as this does tend to kick up some dust, and certainly something to bear in mind, and I would say essential if you're actually doing quite a lot of cutting as well, especially in the confined area, even though I am outside. Apologies for the actual view, because I did actually put some goggles on the GoPro just to protect it from any chips or anything else flying in its direction. I just didn't want to give that any damage or anything else like that. And I mentioned the environment, and it's not ideal from the amount of space, but it is quite ideal in terms of where it is, because anything that flies off, it can't hit anything. There's no glass or anything else to worry about, so perfect from that perspective. Just could have really done with a little bit more wiggle room, especially when it comes to the sides. So cutting through the brick, it's really, or cutting through the paver, it's more a function of the size of the grinder. So this is actually quite a small grinder, I think it's 115mm, so it doesn't quite fit through, so you typically have to do both sides. And as you'll see in just a sec, we just have to give it a bit of a knock to get the bit of the paver out that I actually want to keep and take away, but that normally does the trick. As for the slab itself, much thinner, but certainly a little bit tougher. And really just a question of persevering through and just cutting it. But the one thing that you do find with this black limestone is it does tend to chip a bit more, and doesn't quite create much dust typically as going through the pavers. It does tend to chip and they fly off in various directions. So something else to consider in terms of what you're wearing. Probably shorts aren't ideal for that, but the real thing I was more concerned about is any slips of the grinder itself, and whether you're wearing short trousers or jeans or anything, there's no difference. So that's the main thing. A few little bits of limestone flicking off into me, I wasn't too worried about. So I've knocked up some cement ready, but just before actually starting to put any of these pieces in, let's just do a complete test fit just to make sure. Now, I did check them individually after cutting them a couple of days back, but just before putting them in, let's just absolutely make sure they fit. Now you'll see what I mean about that small piece there as well, and why I thought without that just might look a bit odd. But anyway, that's what we're doing. So let's just check that. Oh, wood lice, don't need that in the mix. So again, I think some of the gaps here are getting quite big, but yeah, I don't think it's too bad. And I think when we infill them with some more cement now, I think that'll be fine. But yeah, wood lice, they're everywhere. And the snails come to visit as well. Let's move them out of the way. So I think that is pretty much perfect altogether. That'll go like that, that'll go like that. And that should be fine. Right, let's get the step in first. I think I might need to mix some more cement up. Anyway, let's make a start and see what we got. So I did cut away part of the path here earlier on, so just to give us a sensible base to put the slab down on. So let's start putting this down. I think these are actually quite high, they've got quite a bed on them. Yeah, because the slabs themselves are quite thin, so I think I'm going to have to just mix a little bit more up as suspected. Right, let's see if we can get that to sit on there, or if we actually need to put a bit more in. Yeah, we're going to need a little bit more. It's just a little bit low, as you can see. Alright, let's try again. What I'm trying to do is actually get these as close together as possible, as that's what I've done with the others. But if I do something like this in future, what I'll do, and you've seen that with the path, although you know, these bits aren't the best of the example right at the end, actually try and just leave a bit more of a gap, so that whatever you infill the gaps with, whether it be, you know, sand or cement or whatever you want to use, it's just got enough of a gap to actually hold, rather than having these tiny ones. Done the same thing on the patio, but that'll be something else for another day. Finally then on to the last three pavers. The mortar's down, getting the pavers laid. So relieved to get to this point. It's taken so long in terms of digging and then laying the other pavers. I thought at points that I'd never actually make it here, but you know, another great milestone. And I think as you see these progress down the garden, you know, psychologically it spurs you on to get it done, because you can see that real progression, which probably not so much in terms of the digging phase. So I'm tapping down here. It's all on the bed of the normal sort of mortar mix that I've been doing, not too weak, 3 parts sand, 1 part cement, and also as well not too watery as well. And I found generally that worked really well. I'm still doing all this by sight, you know, all making some adjustments there as well, and don't be afraid to do that. I'm not using any levels or anything else like that. As normal, if it looks good and I keep checking the levels and it feels good, then that's fine. But I'm just, you know, very wary here, and again I think it's particularly careful not to have too much of a watery mix, because sometimes it can settle a bit further than you can expect. But yeah, just to make sure that everything's on the level and I'm not introducing any tripping hazards in the garden, and then when everything sets, then have to knock it out and start again, which is a bit of a pain in the backside. And you can see here just some of the gaps at the end and why I had to cut that other small little paver just to fit into the gap between the slab at the end of the garden. And onto then what actually turned out to be one of the worst jobs of the whole project, the hand pointing. This just took so much time and was so much effort. I just quite hadn't expected it to be so much of a pain in the backside, and oddly enough was in some respects even more back-breaking work than the actual digging phase, which again I wasn't quite anticipating. But you know, I soon realised as soon as I started this how much effort it was going to be. But again, the way I'd done this, the way I'd set this up, I wasn't prepared to change and actually start using sand and just leaving it as that. Did want to use a mortar mix, so I knew I had to carry on and get the job done. In terms of the actual mix then, usual quantities of sand and cement that I've been using, but just trying to make sure it's more of a watery mix, just to help me get this thing pointed and just really enable it hopefully to be a little bit easier to get the mortar into the gaps and right to the bottom, just to really secure everything in and stop those ants digging all through this and pulling it apart. Now you can see me using my glove an awful lot to smooth this out. Now I did do that initially, and then I actually moved on to using actually a copper pipe, because I seem to have put my jointing tool in a really safe location, which I couldn't find. But I then did move to using a copper pipe, which seemed to work quite well. And then actually for convenience, I went back to using the glove, and it just, again, I just seemed to get on quite well with that. I just seemed to, you know, make things easier and make things flow better. But obviously the one thing that it did do, I think, actually create a little bit more mess around the pavers themselves, and just basically didn't really help with the actual staining. But we'll come on to that in another part of the video, because, you know, as you can I think see already, there's going to be a little bit of cleaning that's going to be needed as this progresses. Even though this is now running at speed, you can see how slow it was actually to complete this. And when you think they've actually put about 300 pavers down, you know, that's an awful lot of pointing to do. But this was definitely the way to go. And even though it was a very tedious task and took that awful long time to do, definitely worthwhile doing. And it's just one of those times where you just need to get your head down and crack on and get the job done. So after all the pointing and then brushing that off, this is what you're left with. Not ideal, but in many places not bad at all. But you can see just a bit of the staining on the pavers, and I didn't want to leave it like that. So tried several things, started off initially just really with a bit of soap and water. Hadn't held out much hope that was going to do much, but I just wondered if that could get it to a state where I was happy, or it was at least acceptable. But no, it was okay. But what I decided to do in the end was really go for an acid cleaner, and this is what you can see me using now on the pavers. So initially did a few experiments just to see how this would work. And ultimately I went for full concentration. I tried watering it down to various levels, but full concentration and painting it on with an old paintbrush. I was wondering initially if that would be enough just to lift off some of the staining that I got, but no, it did really need mechanical scrubbing. So again, not a big surprise, but you know, this is not something I've done before, so I just wanted to take it slow and easy. And also as well, when actually doing the scrubbing, I was just quite aware of that sort of flicking all over the place, and certainly flicking all over me. But I found if I didn't actually put too much down, and it certainly helped using a paintbrush, just trying to limit that, I wasn't going to sort of spill it all over the surface and then just scrub it. I found out that I really didn't get too much, you know, sort of flicking up all over the place and catch me. Now, you know, it did catch me a few times, but actually, you know, it wasn't too bad at all. But I can definitely recommend a good solid set of gloves for doing this, and don't use nitrile gloves, because this stuff will certainly eat through it. Another good suggestion would probably be not to wear shorts or short sleeves for doing this, but as I said, I actually got away with it. But I did have to spray, using that spray bottle you can see just by the side of me, a baking soda solution, which you can use to neutralise the acid. And you'll see me in a minute do that with the whole path, because you know, we've got a dog in the garden. I don't want the dog walking over this. So what I did after going over this, and typically, hopefully as you can see, I went over the areas twice, which that just seemed to be enough of a cut to get the stain off. But after putting this down, after laying the acid down, what I'd then typically do is just try and use the spray bottle full of baking soda, then just to really neutralise that. Then what I'd do is I'd just go over all of that with a soapy water solution. I'd scrub that into the path just to make sure that we get all the acid off as much as possible. And then after that, I'd go over with a hose and just lay down lots and lots of water, just to make sure that if anything was left, it'll be totally diluted and no danger to anything. And after all that effort, this was the finish that I was left with. Back to where it all started, and I'm pleased to say that finally that's all done. We've got it dug, it's laid, it's pointed, and also as well, that's been cleaned. I wasn't quite expecting to do as much cleaning as I had to in the end, but there's a lesson for the future to be a little bit more careful. So hopefully you can see it behind me now. So onwards and upwards to the next thing, because there's always more jobs. Just pleased that I've actually got this one 100% done. So thank you very much for joining me on the channel. Hope to see you again soon, and please subscribe.